Hey everybody, today we are going to be doing a how to draw a sea turtle in the ocean. So for today's drawing we're going to need a plain piece of paper, pencil, eraser, Sharpie or a thin black marker if you have one, and then when you go to color, like I usually say, you can use whatever coloring materials you have at home, crayons, colored pencils, markers, or even paint. Today's drawing might have some small pieces in it, so whenever you have something that's a bit smaller and it becomes more difficult to color, so colored pencils I think would be the best thing for this drawing. But like I said, use whatever you have at home. So I'm just going to set these aside because we won't need those until last. So I'm going to start with my paper vertically, up and down, tall like a building. Okay, now our sea turtle is going to be in the middle, but we're actually going to do him last. We're going to start with the bottom, which is kind of a background, but it's going to be close to us. So on the bottom and the sides, I'm just going to start drawing kind of the setting of the bottom of the ocean with some rocks and some plants and coral and some seaweed. So while we do that, just keep in mind, don't put anything too high up in the middle because this is about where our sea turtle will be. Okay, so start with a pencil. Make sure you're drawing light until you got it right so that you can erase things as you go. So I'm going to start with not a straight line because the bottom of the ocean is pretty organic. Things grow however they want, so it's going to be kind of wiggly and jagged, kind of like rocks, okay? Kind of like the side of a hill or a mountain. So from the side of my paper, maybe about halfway up, I'm just going to draw a line that kind of curves and wiggles as it goes down, so it's not completely straight, down towards the center to the bottom of my paper. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, maybe not making it exactly symmetrical, because again, things are pretty organic in nature. So I'm going to make this one maybe start a little bit lower than halfway across my page, just to give it some variation. Again, not a straight line, a bit wiggly. Okay, so here are some rock formations at the bottom of our ocean. So now coming off of that rock, and you can add as much or as little different things. If you see I'm doing one plant and you want to do a different kind of plant, that's fine. So I'm going to start with adding some, maybe on this side. Again, don't do everything completely straight up the middle because we need to save room for our sea turtle. So down here I'm going to do some seaweed. So basically it's just a long, skinny, wavy, triangular shape, okay? Because if it's in the ocean, it can move and sway. So I'll just make this a little wavy line up to the top. Make this a point because it's like a plant. It's like a really long piece of grass. Okay, maybe make it thicker as it gets towards the bottom. Okay, I'll do some more right next to it. So here's my seaweed. Maybe I'll do some coming up from behind in the middle too. Okay, there I have some seaweed. Maybe I'll come over here and do some coral, okay? So pretty much if you've ever seen Finding Nemo, there's lots of plants and coral and fish and sea creatures in that movie. So anything that you've seen in Finding Nemo, any of those plants will work here, okay? So even in the beginning of the movie, the ones that kind of come up and look like, little fingers where they hide the eggs, that's a plant you could draw. So for here, I'm going to draw some coral. So if you want to draw it like me, this is just one example of coral. So I'm going to start down here and I'm going to go, again, not completely straight, but a bit wavy. I'm going to draw two lines up. It almost looks like a rectangle, but at the top, I'm going to draw a circle because sometimes that coral opens up like this. And I'm going to do another one connected to it a little taller, kind of like a wavy rectangle, again with that oval or circle on the top so that it opens up. Coral's kind of rough. It's like a bumpy rock, so I'm just going to add a couple dots to show some texture. Now I might not color that, but I will go over those dots with a Sharpie just so that those texture spots show up. Okay, maybe I have some more seaweed over here. Again, coral can be all different shapes and sizes, so maybe you have one that just kind of looks like a rock. And again, I'll add some circles to give it some texture. You have some space here, so you could always draw some more plants or coral, or maybe even a starfish. I have a lot of room here, so maybe I'll do a starfish over here. So if you want to do a star, I'll erase this and go slow so I can teach you. An easy way that I do a star is kind of drawing it like a human with a head, arms, and legs. So I'm going to start with the top like a head, 2 arms on the side, straight across and down, straight across and down, and then legs. Oh, this arm needs to be a little bigger. 1 leg, another leg. Okay, so it's not perfect, but that's okay. Starfish are alive and can move around, so that's fine if each piece is not perfect. I'll just add some texture lines here. Maybe some dots. Okay, so there I have a little starfish. Okay, so again, you can go in and add as much plants or coral or rocks as you want. I'll add some of those finger-like wavy plants like in Finding Nemo. Okay, so I'll stop there. You can always go back later and add some more stuff down here if you want. So now I still have the whole top of my page. I have all that space for my sea turtle. Okay, so I'm going to make my sea turtle kind of going diagonally up like he's swimming towards the top of the ocean. So I'm going to start, remember, don't do anything too teeny tiny because it will be hard to draw your details and add color. So I'm going to start with a circle or an oval right here in the middle. If you can't do a perfect circle, that's okay, do an oval. In fact, I will try to do an oval because if you've ever seen a turtle from the top of a shell, usually they are more oval than perfect circle. So again, not too small because it will be hard to add our details. I'm going to push super, super lightly. That way I can change it because I'm sure my oval will not be perfect. So don't push down really hard because you're probably going to want to erase it and change it as you go. Alright, that's good enough for me. I'll go over that just in case it was too light for you to see. And after we go over in Sharpie, we can erase all of our extra lines. Okay? So my sea turtle is going this way, so his head is going to be on this side. Okay, now I'm just going to draw a small, kind of like a circle for the top of his head, sticking out. Okay, and if I'm looking down at him from the top, if this is the back of his shell, maybe I just see his eyes here, and maybe just a couple little black dots for his nose. Okay, next let's do his arms and his feet. So his front arms are bigger than his back legs. Okay, so his front arms I'm going to make come down and around like this, over and down. It's kind of like a banana shape. If it helps to turn your paper like this, I'm going to do this just so that I can see both sides symmetrically. It's a little bit easier. So not right next to his head, but off to the corner here. I'm going to go over and down. Okay? Same thing on the other side, over and down. Now I can bring this back up and connect it to the side of his shell. And if they're not exactly symmetrical, that's okay, because they do move their arms while they swim. So maybe one arm is further up because he's swimming. Okay? Now his back legs are going to be smaller, so move it down towards the bottom of his shell. Same shape, just smaller. Okay? Over and down, over and down, then bring his leg back up to his shell. Now I'm not an expert on turtles or sea turtles, but I know some turtles have little tails, so if you want to add a little tail, just a little triangle. It can be his little tail. Okay? Now you can see he's going in this direction. Alright, now I made a pretty big shell. I have a lot of space to work with, so I'm going to next add some shapes to show those little blocks that are on his shell. Again, they're pretty organic shapes, okay? It might not be a perfect circle or a perfect rectangle. Now, I do want to make sure that you are not drawing these texture shapes too small. Do not fill this up with a bunch of tiny circles. It won't look real, and it will be very hard to color, and it will take a long time. So I'm going to start with one big shape in the middle. It's going to more look like a soccer ball than a circle filled with a bunch of tiny circles. Okay, so if you know what a pentagon is, I'm going to try to do like a pentagon shape. If that is too hard, you can just do a wiggly square. Okay. Okay, so I didn't want to make it perfect pentagon, but you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. Okay, now not right next to it, with a little space in between. I'm going to keep doing those shapes and fill it in, the whole shell. Some might run off the edge, that's okay. These shapes are not going to be perfect, that is okay. Some of them might be smaller. You can do some small and some big. Again, like right here, some of the shapes might go off the shell because we can't see that part. That's okay. If you have any empty spots, you want to add just a part of the shell that we see a little texture, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Again, you don't want to overdo it. Okay, I'm going to do one more thing. Well, I'll just add a little detail in his eyes. I will add a couple bubbles floating up. Now you can see I still have some extra room around here, so those would be some great spots to add some other fish if you would like, or maybe a little baby turtle is swimming with his mom. So you could do some more little turtles, or you could add some fish in the background. That will be up to you. Now is also the time where you can go back down here and add some more texture or some more seaweed. I have a little open space here. Maybe I'll do another little short seaweed. Okay, so you can pause the video here and go back and add some extra stuff if you want. I'm going to go ahead and start tracing in my Sharpie. Now again, I have a big one and a thin one. Some of this stuff is tiny. The starfish, that's kind of small. Maybe for these dots I want to use my thin Sharpie. It's totally up to you. For my bigger areas, I will use my thick Sharpie. So I'll just try to go in the order that I drew to begin with. Now remember, if you're using a Sharpie, don't hold it in one spot for a long time because your paper will soak it up and it will spread out, which you don't want. So you want to take your time and stay on your lines, but don't go too slow that it bleeds into your paper. And again, we can go over this with an eraser at the end. So if you didn't go over your pencil line perfectly, that's okay. Even I'm not. So I can go back and erase those extra pencil lines when I'm done. I'm going to switch to my thin Sharpie because the fat Sharpie, sometimes even right here, if it's too fat, your lines are going to touch where you don't want them to. So I'm going to switch to my thin Sharpie now. I'll go in and add some of those dots for the texture. So even if I color over these dots with a colored pencil, it'll still show up. A lot of my plants were thin, so this was a good idea to switch to my thin Sharpie. And remember, everything in the ocean and in nature is organic. It's not going to be a perfect geometric shape like a triangle or a square or a circle. I mean, sometimes, but not usually. A lot of things in nature grow organically and become whatever shape they want. Instead of just making a dot, I'm making these ones small circles just to have some variation, something a little bit different than the other ones. Alright, I'm going to turn my paper for this. I'm going to take my time on the turtle because I don't want to mess up these lines. So this is a sea turtle, and if you live in Arizona, here in Arizona there's actually a lot of land turtles and tortoises that are super big, and people have them as pets a lot actually. So they're different than sea turtles because they don't live in the water. They live on dry land, and the ones here in Arizona are very dry and they're used to the dry climate. So that's a big difference between the sea turtles and the land tortoises. My bubbles. Now, when you go to color, you can choose if you want to use realistic colors that match real life, or if you want to make it abstract. Maybe you want your turtle to be blue and purple. That's okay. I enjoy doing things realistically because I like the challenge of trying to make it look real, but that is totally up to you. So if you are doing it realistically, obviously the turtle should be some shades of green. And I would try, because we took the time to make these texture spots, these different shapes on his shell, I would suggest making the shapes a different green than in between. Okay, maybe a dark green for in between and a light green for the shape, or a dark green for the shape and a light green in between. But I would make the in between and the shape different colors just so that we can see those shapes that you put all that hard work into making. Okay, now I'm done tracing, so I'm going to put the lid on so that doesn't dry out, and just gently holding my paper, I'm just going to go over and erase those extra pencil marks. This takes a little extra time, but it helps make our page as neat as possible, which is what we call craftsmanship. My kids in my class know I talk about craftsmanship all the time. Because if you're going to take all this time to make some artwork, you don't want it to be messy. So just lightly make sure you're not going too fast so you don't rip your paper. That way all those extra pencil lines that we're showing through, I can get rid of those and I have a nice clean page with only the lines that I want. So by now yours might look a little different than mine. Maybe you have some fish in the ocean next to him. Maybe you have some different plants. I will stop here because you can choose your colors even if you are doing it realistically. All these plants and seaweed, and especially the coral, you can choose the colors for those. There's a lot of different kinds of plants and coral in the ocean. So these, you could do those bright colors that might seem not realistic, but they probably are. You could do pinks and purples and blues for the plants and the coral. Now, for the rocks on the side, I would do either maybe a tan like the sand, or a black or a brown, or something dark like purple, because towards the bottom of the ocean, it gets pretty dark. Maybe all the way at the top, it gets lighter because the sun is hitting the top, but all the way down here at the bottom of the ocean, there's no sunlight, so it's pretty dark down here. So I will stop here. Like I said, you can choose your own colors. I will post a picture of mine when it is all done, just so you can see some realistic colors. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I can't wait to see your turtles.